September 5, 2019 to order. Can I get a roll call, members, please?
Will Kearns,
Here.
Daniel Larson,
Here.
Scott Ohm,
Here.
Richard Peterson,
Here.
Jahi Sembai,
Here.
Vivian Voss,
Present.
Melissa Antol, and Janet Leo are absent tonight.
The next order on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I'll approve the order. I'll make a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for vote.
Motion passed 6-0.
Is there a motion to approve the order of minutes for August 15, 2019?
I move we approve the minutes of the meeting from August 15, 2019.
Is there a second? Second. Are there any additions or corrections to the order of the minutes? Call for vote.
Motion passed 5-0 with one abstaining.
This is the time, we'll move on to the public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on tonight's agenda. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. We have 2 cases before us. Is there anybody signed up to speak?
No one has signed up.
Thank you. I would like to welcome the members of the public and ask that respect the statements made by city staff, the applicant, and my fellow planning commissioners during the proceedings. Please do not clap, yell, boo, make commentary from the audience, or otherwise disrupt the proceedings. I would also like to start by swearing. We're going to move to the first case. I open the public hearing for case number MS-19-03, an application filed by BTM 37th LLC for approval of a minor subdivision combining and splitting the lots located at 5890 and 5910 West 37th Place into 4 lots with 50 feet of frontage each, and would ask that the applicant, staff, and anyone from the public who plans to testify or comment, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter as you know it? Thank you. And ask for the staff report.
Good evening. My name is Zareen Tasneem, and I am a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge's Community Development Department. I'm presenting case number MS-1903, which is a request for approval of a 4-lot minor subdivision on property zoned residential 1C and located at 5890 and 5910 West 37th Place. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the subdivision regulations, and this digital presentation. The property is within the city of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met, and therefore the Planning Commission does have jurisdiction to hear this case.
So noted.
So the site is located on West 37th Place between Harlan and Fenton Street. It is located on the east side of town, 1 block south of West 30th Avenue, which is one of Wheat Ridge's primary east-west corridors. The surrounding area is largely residential with the exception of West 38th Avenue, which contains mostly commercial uses such as 7-Eleven, iPie, and a small strip mall in the area. Although the aerial shows the 2 former houses on the site, they have since been demolished and the site has been graded, so currently it is vacant land. As seen on the zoning map, the site is zoned R1C, which is our smallest lot, single-family residential zone district. It allows for lots that are at least 5,000 square feet in size and 50 feet in width. Based on these R1C development standards, the subject property can accommodate the 4 lots that are being proposed. As the commission is aware, the case tonight will not affect the zoning or permitted use on the property. So a little bit on subdivision 101. Subdivision regulations are found in Article 4 of the zoning code. A plat is a technical document that removes, creates, or defines property lines. It allows the city to evaluate the adjacent right-of-way. It also allows the city to evaluate full documents submitted with the application related to traffic or drainage. As a reminder, the subdivision plat does not affect the zoning or permitted uses on the property. It enables development already permitted by the zoning. Because the plat creates 4 lots, excuse me, it's classified as a minor subdivision, and Planning Commission will be the approving body. There will be no public hearing at City Council. With that, we'll look at the plat, which contains 2 pages. The first sheet is a standard notes and declaration sheets. You have the signature blocks for the owners, for Planning Commission signature and such. The second sheet is the graphic portion, which vacates or gets rid of some existing conditions and establish the new lot lines, easements, and right-of-way. So let's zoom in and walk through this part. So this is the same image zoomed in. Just to orient yourself, north is to the top, and that's West 37th Place. In this image, we see the existing conditions highlighted here in in orange. The total size of the subject property is just under 1 acre. As you saw in the aerial, the site functioned as 2 properties with 2 homes. The eastern property is significantly oversized for the zone district, and the western one is actually comprised of 2 parcels. Here we see the proposed conditions with the 4 lots highlighted in blue. The red is showing the right-of-way dedication through this plat. As the commission will recall, with any subdivision, the city will evaluate the adjacent right-of-way. In this case, it was determined that the current width of West 37th Place is substandard compared to current regulations for local streets, which require 53 feet wide streets. Therefore, 6.5 feet right-of-way dedication on West 37th Place was required, with the applicant building a 5-foot attached sidewalk. So this image highlights the new easements being established. The yellow represents the easement areas for utilities. Typically, we see perimeter easements for new residential lots. While you often see a drainage easement for residential subdivision, in this case, the net change in impervious area will not trigger the requirement for detention or drainage easement, as the impervious surface is actually being proposed to be reduced. Also, with the proposed grading slope being downwards to the north, all the drainage will be directed towards the street. As part of the review process, the application was sent on referral to outside agencies and other city departments. All districts have indicated they can serve the property. The Public Works Department has approved the plat. All utility agencies can serve the property, and the developer will work with those entities to install necessary infrastructures and taps. There has been a 2-week public posting period leading up to today, and we have not received any written comments or objections. Staff did receive 1 phone call from a neighbor who informed me that neighbors were mostly curious about what the zoning allows and what the houses might look like. Ultimately, staff is recommending approval of the plat with 2 conditions. Staff has concluded that all agencies can serve the property and all requirements of the subdivision regulations have been met. We are recommending 2 conditions of approval, which is the requirement for a subdivision improvement agreement with obligations for the applicant to build the sidewalk on West 37th Place, and the requirements for fees in lieu of the parkland dedication. That concludes staff's presentation on the case. I will now take any questions, and the applicant is here tonight as well to take any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
No questions, and I thank you for the dandy little historic document that was included.
Commissioner Simon?
Regarding the fire hydrant, who takes care of that? who puts that in? Who decides where it goes?
So that will be worked out with the fire district. The fire district has requested that of the applicant. So the applicant would need to put that in.
But does the city pay for that, or is this the developer?
No, that would be for the developer to determine.
And just a quick question, maybe this is for the developer. You said that there were single-family homes that were demolished. Who was living there? I mean, did they move out? Were they renters?
As far as I'm aware, I think they were vacant for some time.
Okay. No questions. Further.
Commissioner Larson?
No questions at this time.
Commissioner Vaz?
Maybe staff can address the amount or number of code violations that have been cited on that property?
That's not something I have records of right now, but we can look into that.
In a drive-by, I noticed it's full of weeds, and so I was just wondering, what's the upkeep? Are these absentee owners? What's kind of going on with that property?
We don't typically do a code enforcement review. As you'll recall, there's some cases, like a special use permit, where that's one of the criteria. So maybe a good question for the applicant. I think after the subdivision, they have plans to continue moving forward imminently, so it may address some of those issues. Our code enforcement team generally responds on a complaint basis, so I'm not aware of having received any, but that doesn't mean they haven't gotten them.
Is the applicant here tonight? I didn't notice them being sworn in.
Yes, they are here today in the audience.
Did he swear in? Okay.
I didn't notice. Commissioner Kearns?
No questions.
So the only question I have is the historic document. So right now, currently, the historic document is not what exists today as far as the north-south distances of, in particular, of Lot 18 and Lot 10. So on Exhibit 3, somewhere, I'm assuming something got changed. That's a really old historic document, and it shows Lot 18 and Lot 10 is 150 feet long on Exhibit 4. That one shows Lot 10 and Lot 18 are 178.5 feet long.
Correct. So the western property was actually all of Lot 18 and just a portion of Lot 10, not the entire Lot 10 area. So it's including the entire portion of the historic Lot 18 length, which is 155, plus a portion of the length of Lot 10.
But that was changed prior to tonight, correct?
Correct,
Correct.
yeah, so there was a period in time when a lot line adjustment was exempted from the subdivision regulations. That has not been the case for maybe the last 30 or 40 years. The original plat, the Spallone subdivision, predates the City of Wheat Ridge's incorporation, so we could do a title, chain of title research, but that is common in Wheat Ridge sort of in the era when it was allowed by virtue of being exempted from subdivision regulation. So this will clean up that title because it does straddle two lots from the historic subdivision plat.
And then because that is happening, does Lot 10 need to have a new plat?
It doesn't, because that lot line adjustment was legal at the time that it was completed.
And then on that same exhibit, Exhibit 4, why does it still show the old lot numbers? Like on Lot 1, it still shows Lot 18, and in Lot 10, and then in the new Lot 3, there's an old Lot 19 label. Why does it still show the old? Why wouldn't those just go away? It seems a little confusing.
Sure, since this plat is showing both the existing conditions and the proposed conditions, the old lots are there to show that that was what was existing. It's in the same font and type as the other lots shown on the plat, so they're italicized. So there's a difference in typography to distinguish the two. As you can see on the plat as well, it shows what easements are also being removed and what lot lines are being removed. So type a bit to orient yourself and then to establish the new lots as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, none, thank you. Do the commissioners wish the applicant to come forward? Do you have any questions for the applicant? Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name is Brent Metz, and I'm at 4134 Fenton Street.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
No questions.
Commissioner Simbayan?
Brent, just quickly, was there people living in those demolished homes recently?
So when we purchased this parcel, it was from a developer who had acquired those parcels. That I believe it was his father's house and his uncle's house. And when they had passed, unfortunately, the houses had gone to complete disrepair. So there was animals in them. There were holes in the roof. There was water damage and mold throughout the properties. So they, as a plan to develop this, they demolished the houses and cleaned up the properties.
Commissioner Larson?
As far as your experience, have you had any comments or interactions with the neighbors?
We've met several of the neighbors just from being at the property, and we've had good interactions with all of them.
Good, bad, indifferent?
We've had good interactions with all of them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Voss?
So if you could just address the weed situation that's existing right now on the property?
Yeah, so I guess with regard to the weeds on the property, this had gotten somewhat delayed, and we had planned to go in there and I guess regrade and start working the land, and those weeds probably should have been addressed, and I do apologize for the I guess not getting that taken care of in a timely manner. So we will get those addressed quickly, and it will not be an issue going forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kearns?
No questions, thanks.
I have no questions. Thank you. Did you have one more?
Well, one more question, please. Thank you. What is your work schedule going forward from tonight?
We plan to hopefully finalize our design for the structures that we're going to build on the properties, and then we hope to work with the city to get the plans approved and build 2 of the 4 properties that we plan to build starting sometime this year.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, sir. I will now open up the citizens forum. There will be a 3-minute time limit, and time may not be yielded to another person. Are there any citizens that have signed up to speak? I see 2, actually 1, Tyler Devine. Okay. Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to come forward? Okay, please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Catherine Baldwin Johnson at 3735 Fenton Street. I live around the corner from that property. My questions are around the design, and so from what I just heard, that the design might not be approved, but I'm wondering from the developer how high they might be, considering the Spallone properties have been around since 1953 and are a certain very specific design. So we're questions about that. Is that an appropriate question for now?
Technically, we are only reviewing the plating. We are not reviewing any...
No designs?
No designs.
Shall we come back for that one then?
What's that?
Should I hold my question to another time?
I think...
You're welcome to contact our staff, and we can talk
Great.
about some of those development
Thank
standards
you.
and the bulk plan regulations that apply.
Good, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to come forward tonight? Please come forward. Please come forward, sir, to the podium. And state your name and address.
My name is Richard Lomax, and I live at 5845 West 37th Avenue. And the thing that concerns me, I've lived there for 26 years now, and I've never had a flooding problem. I want to be sure that there are going to be concrete culverts that can handle the runoff from these. I'm not sure square footage on these proposed townhomes, but I want to be sure that there's going to be quite a bit of rain come down like we had in July, and I don't want flooding in my backyard because it has 2 tiers of yard, and I have a brick wall that separates the 2 tiers, and I just do not need it creeping into my basement and crawl space. It's just, I want to make sure that everything drains off well, because the runoff is terrible on the snow melt and on the rainfall.
Thank you.
Sir, can I get your last name again, please? Sir, can I get your last name? Can I get your last name, please?
My last name is Lomax, Lomax.
And your address again?
Pardon?
Your address.
Oh, yes, 5845 West 37th Avenue. The proposed development will be on the southeast of my property.
Perfect, thank you.
Before we answer that question, is there anybody else from the audience that wishes to speak before I close the citizens forum? Okay, I will close the citizens forum. As far as drainage, this is the same kind of line as the height of the building that I would assume will be addressed at a later stage, as tonight we're only addressing the lot lines.
So yeah, we've actually already reviewed this, and everything is in compliance. Everything drains to the street. They're actually improving the drainage situation on that lot because there'll be less impervious area, so less will run off and more will just absorb into the ground.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant from the commissioners? Sorry, ma'am, I've already closed the citizens forum. Do the commission, hold on. Do you have one more, do you want to speak? Okay, I will reopen the citizens forum.
Hi, my name is Judy Thornton, like the city. I live at 5905 West 37th Avenue, and my property is in the back of the proposed development. And this too might go along with the design. I was wondering what will happen with the 6-foot privacy fence that's currently in place, if that will be taken down, replaced, or whatever. Partially because my vine covers all of it, so a little personal interest there. And also, my neighbors and I have noticed an increase of rodent activity in our properties, particularly for voles. And we are assuming that it's coming from the demolition of those properties. And in researching it myself, there's really no way to get rid of them short of a pesticide or a pest control company coming in. So I was wondering if there could be any consideration to consider all of us getting some sort of control mechanism for those, because I understand they don't hibernate, they just continue to repopulate. And if I do something on my own, which I'm not opposed to doing, that's only for me, and then my neighbors, we all have to do the same thing. So just wondering if there could be some consideration to that. I'm assuming it's coming from the demolition of those properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
So typically for fences or something like that, we'd recommend coordinating with the neighbor. So it would be fine if the noise is kept down, to do that maybe in the lobby afterwards would be appropriate. Thank you. Yep.
Is there anybody else from the audience that wishes to speak? I will now close the citizens forum. Are there any other discussion from the commissioners or questions for staff or applicant?
I have a question for staff. One of the people, Richard, mentioned that these would be townhomes, but the briefing mentions that these are single-family homes. What are these are proposed to be single-family, not townhomes?
That's correct. So the zoning only allows single-family residential homes. The townhomes are not permitted under this zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Just a clarification, maybe something I'm supposed to know and don't. But as I look at, I guess it's Exhibit 4, the actual plat. Why at the bottom does it say West 32nd Avenue? It's just conventional to just make huge jumps.
Will you ask again into your microphone? Sorry.
Pardon?
Can you ask again into the microphone?
Oh, sorry. At the at the bottom of the plat, it's designated as West 32nd Avenue. Is that conventional? Is it there's just a whole bunch of ground missing?
There's a bunch of ground missing, so it's not shown as well on the right-hand side, but on the left-hand side where it says Harlan Street, and then if you follow that line south to the bottom of the page, there's that notation that means that we're skipping a bunch of ground. They're trying to illustrate the quarter section tie, so for the purpose of surveying, 32nd is where the quarter section line is.
Okay.
But we acknowledge that it's skipping some area.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff? Okay, at this point, I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to recommend approval of case number MS 1903, a request for approval of a 4-lot subdivision on property zoned residential 1C, R1C, and located at 5890 and 5910 West 37th Place for the following reasons. 1, all agencies can provide services to the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. 2, the requirements of Title IV of the Zoning and Development Code have been met with the following conditions. 1, fees in lieu of parkland dedication shall be provided prior to recording the plat. 2, the developer shall enter into a subdivision improvement agreement with required security prior to recordation of the subdivision plat.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for vote.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. We will now move on to our second case. I open the public hearing for case number WZ-19-01, an application filed by Evergreen Clear Creek Crossing Apartments LLC for approval of a specific development plan for 310 multifamily apartments in Planning Area 2, the Clear Creek Crossing Property Zone Plan Mixed-Use Development. And I'm going to ask that the applicant, staff, and anyone from the public who plans to testify or comment, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter as you know it? Yes. And ask for the staff report.
Okay, good evening, planning commissioners. For the record, my name is Stephanie Stevens, a planner in the Community Development Department within the City of Wheat Ridge. I'll be providing tonight's staff presentation on case number WZ-1901, which is Outlook Clear Creek Crossing, a specific development plan in preparation for the construction of a 310-unit multifamily apartment project. The property is located within the City of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met, and Planning Commission does have jurisdiction to hear this case.
So no.
Also noted is in adding into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and this digital presentation. So first off, just orienting us a little bit to the site. This is a 2018 aerial on the screen. This is the first specific development plan to come before you as part of the Clear Creek Crossing overall project, which is located at the southwest quadrant of I-70 and Highway 58. The Planning Area 2, which is also known as the multifamily portion of the project, Planning Area 2 is located just east of Clear Creek Drive, the future Clear Creek Drive. I've kept the right-of-way limits on for you so you can get some orientation of Clear Creek Drive and 40th Avenue. It's just south of the Clear Creek open space and kind of central to the overall Clear Creek Crossing development overall. The property is currently vacant. There are a couple of pieces within Clear Creek Crossing overall that contain the Coors Water Storage Pond, Clear Creek itself, and then we do have hook ramp construction underway, which the hook ramp is kind of shown on the bottom portion of your screen. That just began in July of 2019. Denver water line replacement was recently conducted where they replaced an 80-inch water pipe throughout the site. And then 40th Avenue and Clear Creek Drive construction is underway, which will provide the primary access to any development that comes in within the Clear Creek Crossing project. The site itself is zoned planned mixed-use development, as with the surrounding Clear Creek Crossing properties. There is a portion of it to the west and to the north that are still owned under Coors, and those were with the initial annexation that took place back in 2005. Those remain under planned commercial district zoning. To the north across I-70 is mostly industrial land within the 44th Industrial Business Park. To the east across I-70 is planned commercial development, the Applewood Village Shopping Center. To the south is some single-family homes if you go further south outside of Clear Creek Crossing. And then to the west is the Applewood Golf Course, as well as the Coors water storage facilities. So again, this is a request for a specific development plan. It's the second kind of step in the overall plan development process. The first step took place when they came in for a zone change back in 2018. As you are probably familiar, it was originally annexed back in 2005 and 2011 under that planned commercial development zoning with intentions of the Cabela's and Walmart site. Those plans never came to fruition. Evergreen, who's the current property owner now, took ownership of the property back in 2016. Shortly after, they came in for the ODP or zone change process in preparation for the overall development, and now we're starting to see the second steps come to fruition, which is the specific development plan, and this piece in particular is for Planning Area 2. So the purpose of this public hearing is to review the specific development plan for conformance with the underlying zoning. And in this case, the underlying zoning is the plan development, which is regulated by the Clear Creek Crossing Outline Development Plan, the Design Pattern Book, and the Vision Book for the property. And we included links to full documents as well as excerpts in your packets. It's quite a lengthy development standard guideline handbook, so we're happy to kind of walk through that with you and answer any questions you have. So this specific development plan particularly is proposing 310 for-rent apartments through a combination of 7 multifamily buildings and 3 carriage unit buildings. It also includes 4 detached garages, so a total of 14 actual buildings on the property, as well as a community clubhouse. There's pocket amenity, kind of park-like areas, as well as a grid-like internal street network. And the density that's being proposed is 24.7 DU per acre. And this subject property, being within a planned development, is exempt from the city's charter limitation of the 21 dwelling units per acre. So this is just an excerpt from the outline development plan, which really outlines some of the major concepts of the street network and pedestrian network. Also shows you what each of the planning areas is designated as. So north is located on the left side of the screen, south to the east. Planning area 2 is on the further northern side, kind of centrally to the development, but on the north side, just south of the creek in general. The boundary lines have been reconfigured a bit with the platting of the properties, so it looks a little bit different than what those boundaries look like for the outline development plan, but you can still see kind of the primary location of planning area 2, as well as some of the pedestrian circulation that was kind of called for back in 2018. And the dark black arrows are kind of where the intended conceptual vehicular network would come in, which is pretty critical to the development, both pedestrian and vehicular connectivity. We allowed, based on the subdivision platting that took place, the cul-de-sac to end at kind of right where this multifamily site is on the west side, until such time that any development on the north side with the Coors property develops. So this internal vehicular and pedestrian circulation network is really critical to making the whole thing function and circulate properly from a traffic standpoint. So pulling from some of the development standards that are listed in the design pattern book and outline development plan, uses themselves can be found in the ODP, and multifamily is a permitted use in planning area 2. Now, the rest of the development standards are primarily found in the design pattern book. It's a maximum height of 65 feet for residential uses, minimum of 30% landscaping for residential uses specifically. All other uses within planning area 2 are allowed to be down to 20%. Setbacks are unique in this development as it identifies a primary frontage and a secondary frontage and kind of a build to, which is that they actually need to build to that property line within 0 to 20 feet. So the primary frontage is Clear Creek itself, and it's required to have a 50% build to with 50% of the buildings up into the build to, and then the secondary frontage is Clear Creek Drive, which requires a 30% build to. Parking itself is required to have a minimum of 495 vehicular spaces and 31 bicycle spaces. And then architecture gets quite detailed in the design pattern book, providing design guidelines for a modern agrarian architectural theme that would be a common unified theme that would be provided across the entire Clear Creek Crossing development. It's also important to note that the design pattern book identifies, in addition to planning areas themselves, it identifies sub-districts, and this is entitled the Homestead Sub-District of Planning Area 2, so it's meant for those multifamily and residential type uses. So now kind of going through more of the details of how they're meeting the development standards, the site data table, which is found on the cover sheet of the SDP, goes through what the zoning is, what the uses are, some of the required minimums and maximums in terms of building coverage, open space, parking, and density itself. So building coverage, they are meeting building and lot coverage requirements. Their maximum or their minimum required open space is 30% in landscaping, and they're proposing a 33% open space area, and then parking-wise, they're required to have 495 vehicular parking spaces, and they're proposing 552. Bike parking, they're providing enough bike racks that will provide for 32 bike parking spaces. Going further into the development standards, I'll just walk you through kind of the site design a little bit. We'll touch on the areas that I think will help merit provided enough information to give a decision based on the SDP criteria specifically and conformance with that underlying zoning. So as we talked about, there are 14 actual structures on the site. And those are located in the blue portions on the screen, primarily oriented along the creek and Clear Creek Drive. Just pointing out right off the bat are the primary frontage along Clear Creek Drive contains 45.5% of the buildings within the build two, where it's required to have 50%. So the design pattern book actually allows for some flexibility in the regards of development standards. So it gives the discretion of a combination of the Architectural Control Committee, which was created for the Clear Creek Crossing project, kind of a separate entity. It does contain some city staff. But them in combination with the Community Development Director, if in concurrence, can modify a design standard to the extent that it does not, that it still meets the intent of the design standard. So in this case, it's providing that pedestrian experience along the creek, really bringing those buildings up to it and creating an inviting place for people to be. And then also that it wouldn't provide any adverse impacts to adjacent properties. So in this case, the ACC, as well as the Community Development Director, found that it does continue to meet the intent, and actually, because of the tiering of the retaining walls, it provides a more inviting pedestrian experience than it would if it were all within the build two at the 50%, where we wouldn't be able to tier those walls to make it to that requirement. Some of the other site aspects are the internal street network, which is shown in kind of the gray color on the screen. It's intended to be a grid-like pattern to the extent feasible. Something to note, so Clear Creek Drive is on the west side, or on the left side kind of the screen. To the north is a drainage tract. It's the forebay that is existing and will be used for the regional detention. On the east side, or the right side of your screen, will be the hospital site for SCL Health. It's known as Planning Area 1. And then to the south is also Planning Area 1, but that's kind of where that internal roadway network is anticipated to come in. So it's noted as a future road on the SDP plan, but the final designs are not quite known yet on that. Some of the vehicular connections, the main drive comes off of Clear Creek Drive. That'll be the main access to the site. And then a secondary access is provided at the southeast corner. And that is currently a temporary condition until more is known on the site development of the hospital site. So both with grading and with access, it's very difficult with this one being the first one in, that there will be some adjustments that'll be needed as we move along further in development. But in terms of an emergency and public access and safety standpoint, they are providing that secondary access in the interim at the southeast corner there. Eventually, there's anticipation that kind of the central access that you see will pop through to that future road as well and provide a pedestrian connection. And then on the east side, centrally to the development, would also provide a pedestrian connection over to the hospital site. The major open space kind of areas are noted on the screen in green. The clubhouse is being one of the major areas. We wanted this to act kind of like the main central drive, to act like a private local street, so it has an enhanced intersection, has a nice open space terminus area, and then another very prominent open space area will be the what they're calling the overlook amenity area, which is on the north side of the site, and gives that public interface to the creek that kind of the design pattern book calls for with that build too. It's intended to meet that design standard. There's also a dog run proposed on the northeast side. You'll notice in your conditions of approval, there are a couple of recommended conditions in terms of agreements with adjacent property owners, as well as the Longs Peak Metro District for anything that's kind of off-site in terms of access and grading and retaining walls that may need to be finalized prior to the SCP being recorded. So getting a little bit deeper into the open space, this is just a couple of renderings provided by the applicant that shows what those amenity areas might look like. The top left is the pool clubhouse amenity area. On the right side, top right side of your screen is the overlook area that abuts the creek on the north side, and then on the bottom part of your screen is what that enhanced intersection kind of looks like at the terminus of coming in on the main entry drive off of Clear Creek. Oops. Moving into architectural details, so the larger multifamily buildings are proposed to be 4 stories tall. There's 2 building types. One's a bit larger than the other, and they do provide some variation in architecture in terms of materials, colors, and mostly the main entry and enhancing those main entries. The colors have stayed with like the rustic raw theme. They've used board and batten. They're proposing to use board and batten, horizontal lap siding, and a stone veneer product that are in line with that modern agrarian theme called for in the design pattern book. And the maximum height of the multifamily buildings is proposed to be the tallest of all of the buildings, and it's at about 53 feet, just less than 53 feet in height, so well under the 65 foot that's required. This is a rendering of the carriage unit. It is a 2-story building. There are 3 of them on the site. Mostly there's 2 along Clear Creek Drive specifically, and then 1 kind of central to the development. These are 2 stories at about 24 feet tall, well below that maximum height again, and has tuck under parking underneath and units above. This is the rear side elevation, what that would look like on the garage side of things. And then this is a rendering of the clubhouse. It would be kind of one of the focal points, what you'd first see off of coming from Clear Creek Drive and 40th Avenue intersection. And then this is a view of architecture of what it might look like from the creek. It also shows that tiered retaining wall that's being proposed along the creek, and what that height difference kind of looks like at 52 feet from the grade. So with that, the applicant did go through the full process for a specific development plan. We're not a full service city, so it was sent out to our Applewood Sanitation District, Consolidated Mutual Water District, and multiple various other referral agencies, as well as the Architectural Control Committee, which is a required step for anything within Clear Creek Crossing. With that, the ACC had recommended approval. There weren't any major concerns with agencies, and the one concern that remained with that potential long-term secondary access, working that out with the fire district as part of the conditions of approval. And the applicant will be responsible for any needed upgrades to the site. We did not receive any public comment, although it was sent on the 15-day public notice period that is required for specific development plans. And so really the SDP criteria that you're reviewing against tonight is looking at standards that are consistent with the plan development, making sure the SDP is compliant with the ODP, the outline development plan, the uses and the development standards of the design pattern book as well, and that there's adequate infrastructure involved. And with that, staff does find that this criteria has been met and is recommending ultimate approval. Planning Commission is the final approval authority for an SDP application. And staff is recommending approval with conditions, some of which, well, all of which are noted on the screen. And I have printed out a new revised motion sheet for you, which shows one of the conditions being revised, specifically item number 3, which is in reference to the ultimate build out and potential for that secondary access. So Specifically, in the design pattern book, it calls for this internal loop road or internal roadway network, but because specifics on the design of that road has not quite been defined, we wanted to provide some alternative variation just in case it might work out better in the instance that that secondary access proves to be a safety issue or brings about things that we can't predict until the time of build out. So what you'll see as the revised condition is adds an alternative for secondary access that would have to be approved by Public Works in lieu of the loop road if that's deemed to be best at this stage of build out of the development. The others relate to technical corrections, mostly related to labels, typos, and notes. The second condition that's being proposed is agreement for the off-site secondary access and basically agreement by West Metro Fire, the City of Wheat Ridge, and Public Works staff, community development staff. And then the last one is for agreement regarding with Longs Peak Metro District, who's currently going to be maintaining and taking ownership of the retaining walls. So this is a formal agreement that acknowledges that and makes sure that we have that in writing for the long term. So that concludes my staff presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know that the applicant also has a presentation as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
I have, I guess, 3 areas that I want to raise some questions. The first one has to do with actually sort of outside of this design, but this is for staff. They're using 2.5 people per unit. There are 775 people moving in here. They offer over 500 parking spaces. And I'm interested in what happens with the intersection with 32nd. It's already a busy intersection. This says there's a pre-existing light. Yes, there is. It's confusing as hell because you got 2 lanes going into it and it comes out as 1 lane. And the intersection at Youngsfield and 32nd, I suspect, will also be impacted by this development. So I'm wondering what the city's plans are to address the increasing flow of traffic.
So in a moment, I'll let my colleague Jordan Jeffries respond specifically to the traffic analysis, but just as a sort of contextual response, the zone change addressed a lot of the overarching traffic for the property as a whole. When the city, Stephanie mentioned, and it's also in the staff report, the city worked with Federal Highways to phase the improvements so that we could separate development north of the creek and south of the creek. So we actually have a federally approved traffic study for this whole region. And the reason that we sought to have mixed development, specifically have an apartment property here along with the commercials, is because they often have differing peak times for traffic. And hopefully, because there's opportunities to work, live, play, shop, dine, sleep, there's not as much vehicular volume. I don't believe that 2.5 people per unit is usually the number for an apartment unit, but we use the ITE, so Institute of Traffic Engineers, has a standard trip generation rate for all of the land uses that could have potentially been allowed in the development as a whole. So the outline development plan allows uses and has maximum trip generation rates for the whole project. And then with each SDP, we have to receive a letter that says it's complying with that overall traffic study. So conceivably, you could get a use in 4 or 5 properties down the line that would tip the scales past the overall number of trips that are allowed to be generated on the site. I'll let Jordan maybe talk specifically about some of the improvements that are happening at 32nd. There's a lot of construction and some changes that are going to be happening. But with signalization at that loop road, 40th, and the loop road may help relieve some of the congestion at 32nd.
And also one thing to mention is in Exhibit 3 in the zoning document excerpts, the third one in that does outline for you where the full movement intersections are proposed, where they're anticipated in terms of the overall development as well as the traffic signals and intersection improvements.
Yeah, it was on that where I noticed the 32nd Avenue existing stoplight.
So yeah, there was a very detailed traffic analysis performed for the overall project, the Clear Creek Crossing zoning approval, which was, I think, approved a year ago or something. But that's a very detailed analysis. We worked with CDOT and, like Lauren said, FHWA. So really for this project, all they need to do is demonstrate compliance with that. So some assumptions were made in that original report. And now that they're building, they've gone and they've had to verify that they've met those assumptions, which they have. As far as improvements, there are some short-term and long-term improvements that are part of that overall traffic study. And I'm not familiar with them right now. I'd need to look at the report. I don't remember all of the recommendations offhand. But I believe there are some improvements, and they'll be built, you know, in the next decade or so along there.
And the one thing to note maybe is that as a part of the City of Wheat Ridge voter-approved bond, we are modifying the access onto I-70, on and off I-70. So 32nd is heavily congested right now because that's the only way to get on and off I-70. So construction of the new hook ramps in this development will really modify the traffic patterns in a holistic way.
So, and what's the sequence of build-out? I mean, do you build the access onto 70 early in the process?
It's happening now.
It's happening now, okay. Staying on traffic for a moment. Clear Creek Drive, right now it's going to be a cul-de-sac.
Yes.
And with the right gold fairy dust or whatever, it's going to turn into a through street.
Right.
How does it cross Clear Creek and the Clear Creek Trail?
So it would have to be a bridge, and that's part of the reason that this development has not happened until we were able to phase these infrastructure costs. So there was no development scenario that could foot the bill to cross the creek and get to, and redo the interchange at Highway 58. So if the city wanted to see any development out here, we had to revise the environmental assessment to phase the improvements. It's not an insignificant cost to cross the creek with a bridge.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
I was a little curious about, so the trail's going to go under a bridge. So it'll be
Should that ever, if there's ever that development.
under I-70 and then under Clear Creek Drive.
Right, my understanding, my recollection is that the traffic study for that portion considers significantly less intensive development from a traffic generation rate, so more of like the light industrial type development that you see on the north side of 58. But yes.
Okay. But staying with traffic, has there been, I suspect I know the answer. Has there been any speculation about what this does to traffic on Clear Creek Trail?
From a pedestrian standpoint?
Pardon?
From a pedestrian standpoint?
Yeah.
How the trail is impacted?
Right.
And
If you have 775 people there,
Yeah, I mean, we're always.
how many are
taking
going to wander onto the
consideration
trail?
use of our multimodal trail, so I don't think it's going to it will have more users, but we view that to be a positive thing, to give options for commuting and recreation. So it can accommodate that
Because there's a big trailhead just on the other side of 70.
at Youngfield, correct?
Yeah. So there hasn't really been any systematic study of it.
No,
The trail can get pretty congested.
it can, yep.
And so you add 700 people, potential users of the trail, and congestion gets worse.
Sure.
So, and my last question for now is, so this is a giant project, one small corner of it. How many degrees of freedom have you given up? How much does this limit everything else that can happen there?
I wouldn't say that it limits. PA2 is always considered to be through all the zoning documents, to be the primary residential component of this project. We have been considerably firm in our commitment to the ODP's requirements for certain circulation patterns, including that loop road. So I don't know that we've conceded on much. The applicant can maybe give their perspective on that. But, you know, it's always hard to do a phased development. Nobody has a crystal ball.
Right.
But I think we've stayed pretty true to the original intent and the regulatory documents.
Okay. So that, is this, I was going to ask the developers, but I'll ask you. Is it intentional that this is the first phase? Or is it coincidental that this is the
I think
first
that's
phase?
coincidental, but I'll let the developers speak to more to it, because I think it's just the way that the cards have lined up
Okay.
for order of purchase. But also back to your question in terms of this being the multifamily use, this is specifically what's called for in the ODP, what was contemplated in the zoning. So I think that's when that determination was made on what the use would go here is, and it does comply with the use.
Okay. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just trying to find out what's the impact. of
Sure,
the whole thing.
no, it's a valid question. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Samai?
This is more of a historical question. It says on, under number 3 in the specific development plan, I guess on page 4, the site is among those exempted from the charge's density cap based on a 2009 ballot question. And it sort of precedes me, so could you explain how this was exempted?
So in 2009, so the city's charter has a height limitation of 35 feet for residential use and a density limitation of 21 dwelling units per acre. It actually predates my time at the city too, just barely, but the exempted areas roughly conform to the boundaries of the urban renewal area. So it's the I-70 Kipling urban renewal area, of which this is a part, and the Wadsworth corridor urban renewal area. So those two areas were included in a single question, I believe, maybe 2 questions, to a vote of the people, and there was an acknowledgement that if we're going to have density or height in any area of the city, these would be the areas that are appropriate. So the I-70 Kipling urban renewal area is actually quite large. This is a very small fraction of it, but that this is one of several properties that would be allowed to exceed those height and density caps. And then what is more traditional would be that a height and density cap is in the zoning, and in this case it is in the ODP for this, and they comply with those maximums.
Thank you. Commissioner Larson?
Thank you. If we can get back to the secondary access issue, and I know you went through it in detail, but if you could go one more time to help me understand that the idea of the secondary access found to be inadequate, then the city may go back in and say, you guys are going to have to change that. Help me understand what that
it's
really means.
totally valid question. So we kind of went around and around on this, but it's finding that balance with the fire district as well as the city and public works and a public safety standpoint. At the current location, it's a little bit closer to the intersection of Clear Creek and 40th, Clear Creek Drive and 40th, than the city would like it to see it be. So we've limited it to a right-in, right-out movement. If left turns if it weren't to be followed, if the appropriate measures weren't necessarily taken to prohibit those left turn movements, then it could potentially become a dangerous intersection. And that would be, from our standpoint, and I might let Jordan touch on this a little bit as well, but that would be where we would trigger a new location for that access potentially.
Sure. So I think it's highly unlikely that that would become an issue, but we've seen it before over here with like Starbucks at Applewood Village. They have the right in, right out, and people just disobey it and make turns in. So if that were to happen here, it'd be a little more dangerous just because of the volume of traffic and the proximity to the intersection. But it'd be an illegal maneuver. So, you know, I think we have options. We could have the police out there. We're looking at some bollards on springs that would further limit people's access and ability to make that left turn, whereas fire trucks still could. So, you know, like I said, it's probably unlikely, but Public Works would want to be sure that that doesn't become an issue.
Commissioner Voss? Commissioner Kern?
Yeah, okay, on the mixed-use outline development plan, we look at a couple of trail connections. One of them is a multi-use trail connection by Prospect Recreation and Park District that appears to go into the golf course. Is that, if the golf course gets redeveloped, it wouldn't go into the golf course as is, right?
I believe it does. It was part of an agreement associated with the golf cart. The applicant could probably address that in a little bit more detail because I think they're working with them.
Okay. The other question is, what is the forebay and why is there a trail connection to it? As far as I understand it, it's a detention facility?
So that's just a maintenance access.
Oh, okay.
Because it's there to kind of catch sedimentation, so they'll need to drive down there and scoop that out once in a while.
The retaining walls, are these planned to be planted? I see in the graphics they have vines and things hanging off of them, but are there planters that'll be designed into the retaining walls to allow those vines, or are these retaining walls just blank?
Yeah, so we would require in between the two tiers is a 5-foot separation that would need to be planted, as well as on the north side of the wall, some tree plantings. So that's technically outside of the property limits of the multifamily site. It'll be coming in as a separate permit from Longs Peak Metro District, but we will require those plantings at that time. But that's probably why you see a more sparse planting showing on the specific development plan.
Okay, that's it, thanks.
Does any of the commissioners have any other questions? I have a couple questions. I assume that there's probably some type of blanket cross-access easement for this project, that they can have access and grant access to the other planning areas.
So on the current subdivision plat, there is a blanket, basically a blanket cross-access. At the time of specific development plan and building permit, that's what triggers those true cross-accesses to come into play. So we are reviewing a subdivision plat concurrently with this SDP, and we're defining where those cross-access points have to go. It basically follows the internal roadway network, and then where you see potential for future pedestrian or vehicular, we're also denoting that as specific cross-access too.
Thank you. And then I noticed on the cover sheet number 1, there seems to be a number of sheets missing from the packet: 8 through 11, 14 through 17, 27 to 30, 44. If you could kind of go over that, because at the end of the day, what is the planning commission reviewing, approving?
Sure. So staff did use discretion with the knowing how large this packet was going to be to provide the materials that would be appropriate to review specifically based on the SDP criteria with the development standards and with the underlying zoning for the property. What was removed was primarily just the zoomed in views of the utility, mostly construction plan related. So it's more what you would see in a civil construction document, more technical in nature. It's really just the utility plan and the grading plan, those zoomed in sheets. So the overall plan sheets were provided to you in that regard, but the zoomed in sheets are removed. Other than that, everything's included.
And so staff will be reviewing the missing sheets?
Staff has reviewed everything in the SDP, correct?
Okay. I have no other staff questions. I do have one comment. It looks like the applicant is requesting probably some small little piece of artificial turf somewhere, and I know the code prohibits it, but this is the second multifamily project that has requested a small piece of artificial turf. What is, I guess, could staff comment on that?
Yeah, really good question. Thanks for pointing that out. So that the area where they are proposing a small sliver of artificial turf is in the community clubhouse, just kind of in that amenity area that would be fenced in. It's for like a bocce ball or bags, cornhole kind of area. So amenities, it's a very small space, and so the design pattern book as well as the city in general prohibits the use of artificial turf. However, the design pattern book does allow for those modification to design standards. And the reason for prohibiting specifically in the design pattern book is that it doesn't want it to replace any landscaping or the intent of it in replacing any landscaped areas, and they are not including that in their landscape calculations, so it's kind of just a separate proposal, but it would be allowed if it's approved as part of that modification to design standards, which Community Development Director and ACC have both signed off on at this point.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Thank you. Let's hear from the applicant. You could state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Wickstrom. I live at 152 Willow Leaf Drive in Littleton. I'm with Evergreen Devco, the master developer and the apartment developer of the property. Thanks for having us here tonight. This is the end of about 3 years of work on just on the multifamily site. I can't tell you the number of site plans and building designs that we've been through. We've had terrific support from staff, Stephanie, Lauren, Jordan, and as well as the ACC, who really provided a lot of feedback on connectivity, on roads, on building colors, on building design, and it's been terrific. Just want to introduce some of our consultants. We've got Harris Coker Smith, our civil engineers here, Norris Design, and our planners, and Kephart, our engineers, are here. So, cool. All right, so Stephanie actually stole most of my thunder. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes to introduce Evergreen and to share with you some of the projects, the other communities that we've developed in the Denver area, to give you an idea of what it is we're up to. Evergreen has been around for 45 years, founded by two guys in LA over a racquetball game. We have developed something in the range of, I think, 600 properties over that 45 years. The firm originally was really focused on the retail side of the business, and we were selected by Walgreens to be a preferred developer. So during the Walgreens expansion area, we built something like 325 Walgreens across the western part of the United States, making us the largest Walgreens developer in the country. Evergreen got into the multifamily business in about 2010. I have been developing multifamily in the Denver metro area in the mountains since the 90s, and have done thousands of apartment communities in the area, and joined Evergreen to start that business in 2010. You can see, I wanted to just kind of click through some of what we've done. So the company's development efforts today are primarily in retail, residential, and mixed use. And we're finding this mixed use niche is really terrific for us. This is a great example of a mixed use property where we're providing both residential and retail properties that work synergistically with one another and create some pretty neat spaces. In addition to building on the retail side, we've got, I wanted to point out that just the first picture here, which is from Stapleton. Is this on the eastern edge of Stapleton, where a new King Super has been built? This is our East Bridge development. The wing that you see there is part of a Little Man ice cream shop. And I point this out because this is when our retail folks come in and share with you a site plan for their development. I don't think you're going to get a wing, but they're really good at creating these intimate. This is a chef-driven restaurant area with a lot of the local chefs from Denver whose names you would know. In Colorado, just wanted to kick through some of the developments that we have built recently. Top left, number one, is Outlook Littleton. It's a 2- and 3-story, 250-unit property that we did. It's near Aspen Grove Shopping Center. If I go counterclockwise, bottom left actually is one of the ones I'm most proud of. And this is our Outlook Golden Ridge. So this is the property above the Taj Mahal in Golden with the bridge that connects to the light rail. This is 177 units. And interestingly, it was originally designed as a mixed-use deal. We thought and had and worked in cooperation with the city that having that bridge connection to the light rail would create a ton of traffic through there and would require ground floor retail. As it worked out, it didn't. The property's sort of at an end of a cul-de-sac and so doesn't get that traffic. And we have subsequently converted those ground floor units into residential units. This property is a great comparable product of what we're building here, what we're proposing to build here at Clear Creek. It's a 4-story property, elevator served, central corridors, and tuck-under parking on one side. It's really terrific. Top right is Outlook DTC. This is a property that we built at Bellevue and Ulster in the Tech Center. We did it in partnership with JP Morgan. So it was, for a little company that started building apartments in 2010 to get JPM as a partner was really an exciting thing for us. Going down from Outlook DTC in the 3 o'clock position, you'll see Outlook Seven Hills. This is a super cool deal. It's a little 96-unit for-rent townhome property in Aurora. It's at the corner of Hamden and Tower Road, and I'm excited about how that's coming. Bottom right is the same 2-story, 3-story product that we did at Littleton, but this is out by the airport in the Gateway subdivision, and that gives you an idea of some of the type of product that we've been building across the city. But we're really here to talk about Outlook Clear Creek. And I don't think Stephanie got this one, so maybe I have one picture that she didn't have in her package, but I really like the aerial, and it shows you kind of a picture of how that property might look or should look in 3D. She did grab these guys, but these are elevations from the Clear Creek Trail. What I really think is so cool about these is that they're actual photographs with the building CAD drawings superimposed on them and colored to match the buildings, the properties. So Stephanie did mention that we have 17 large buildings, 3 carriage units, the clubhouse, and the amenity spaces. So we've been through that. I don't want to waste your time going through it again. I'm happy to answer any questions. But this one's sort of an interesting match. The 5 and 7 foot wide pedestrian sidewalks are in the green and brown on the property, and you can see the extent of the connectivity and walkability we've tried to create within our community. It's a little bit harder to see the roads. They're underneath the sidewalks, but again, you've seen those in Stephanie's presentation as well. Again, here's the clubhouse. You've seen this before. The theme is modern agrarian, and it's kind of an exciting theme to do. We worked really closely with ACC and the staff to create great floor plans and great architectures throughout the property, I think. One of the things that we did actually working with the ACC is that we got into the kind of the details of what the colors were. So to get it right, we actually went out and hired a color consultant, which we haven't done in the past. We've relied on our architects to do that, but to have someone that ties in every detail of the colors, for example, do the window frames match the hardware on the decks and the colors in the building and the soffit trims, and I am super excited about how this thing came together. We have both the smaller and larger buildings. There are 38 and 51 units. The carriage units you've seen before. These are 3 single-family units on top of 6 garages. And in case anybody does have a question, the garage that goes with those units is under the bedroom in the units. So the other garage is available to somebody else, but it's not under the bedroom, and so it doesn't wake people up in the morning when folks are leaving. A detail that we've experienced. This is kind of an interesting exhibit. It shows you the examples of the board and batten, the lap siding, the colors, and the field stones to the best extent that we can actually present them in a projection like this. But it really does pick up some of the agrarian look. So I'm going back to the site plan here, and I want to talk a little bit about amenities. Of course, you've referred to already in your conversations the Clear Creek, which is a huge amenity, accessed over 600 miles of bike hike trails in the Denver metro area, we think will be used. The overlook area, which you've seen the close-ups of, and you'll see again, is right here. This is a pocket park within the property. And then our dog walk on the northeast corner of the property. We find that something in excess of half of our residents own animals, own dogs. I mean, they're very popular in Colorado, as probably most of you know. And so we work hard to accommodate those. I'll get to it in a second, but in addition to doing the dog parks, one of the things we put in our clubhouse is a dog wash. So if you picture a stainless steel sink from a commercial kitchen with a ramp and a little door on the side, that's an amenity in the clubhouse. Again, it's giving a wave to the folks that have animals within the property. And it also does this really good thing of keeping pet hair out of all the drains in all the units in the property. So it has its side benefits for both of us. The terminus of the entry drive, again, is a second pocket park, and then down here on the south portion of the property is the clubhouse. So we've talked a little bit about the clubhouse, but let me take you through the clubhouse. It's community. Community is a very important part of successfully running an apartment community. And when I say, I'm using the word twice, but the community of the residents and creating the friendships and the relationships that people have in the properties is something we focus very hard on. So within the design, we incorporate things that help to build community, and our property managers work hard to do that. It has a lot of benefits. It helps the safety of the property when people know one another. And frankly, it gets more renewals. People stay if they like our property, and we're less likely to have vacancies and turnovers and the costs of doing that. An example of one thing that we do in our clubhouse, or one thing we do in all of our properties, is we put our mailboxes at the clubhouse. It's the one place everybody goes every day, mostly, and it gives the property manager a chance to reach out and touch and communicate with each of those folks, or whether they choose or not. I mean, they don't have to talk to the property managers, but it's great if they do. Another concept that we've added in the mail areas, which is this portion of the outbuilding here, are package lockers. I don't know, I get home pretty late in the evenings, and when UPS has something that they want to drop off at my house, frequently I have to go to the UPS store to go get it, 3 days, 5 days, the next weekend later. In this case, we have lockers that UPS, FedEx, the U.S. Post Office can put the packages in the lockers. The resident receives a text, which includes a code, goes to a central computer station, they pop in their code, the door pops open, and there's the package. So it provides another amenity for the residents, which allows 24-hour access. So if you're working crazy hours and get back to the property when the management's not around, it's a nice advantage. So let me just run through really quickly on the clubhouse some of the things we have. We've got a green wall in our clubhouse, so there will be an entire wall of live green plants, fitness, Wi-Fi. I've got I call it my Starbucks room, a trestle table with coffee that people can come and hang out at. It's a little bit off to the side, so it's a quiet place where people can work. It tends to be one of my offices away from office, but our residents really like that. The dog wash we've talked about. We do bike and ski repair shops in our properties. Again, biking, a huge thing, especially here on the west side of town with the connectivity and the access to the trails to provide the residents a place where they can go and have tools and an air pump so that they can work on their bicycles or tune their skis or their boards. So that's something else that we've thought about in there. Let's see. So the seating area, you've seen this at the end of the main entry drive. I think the first impression that people get of the property is a big deal. It's important to getting them to lease the property if they get a visceral yes when they see both the landscaping as well as the interiors of the clubhouse. And I think this street with that landing is part of getting that visceral yes. We've talked about the overlook, and again, is a place for our residents to gather and see and take a look at Clear Creek, and again, create more of that community. So that's what I have to say to you tonight. Again, thank everybody for your help on this long journey, and thank you for listening to me this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson? Commissioner Semboyan? Commissioner Larson?
No questions right now.
Commissioner Voss?
Yes, I have several questions, and you've brought up more questions than I even had. The access to this overlook, is any of this public, or is this all just for the renters? And will anything be
It's really
fenced?
intended for the renters, but there are no barriers.
No fencing?
Except maybe at the park itself. So within the property, we don't, we don't have any kind of physical barriers.
All right, and then can we talk about the rent cost?
We can. The average rent on this property, I'm pro-forming to be something under $1,800 a month. Just for comparison, and this is really kind of an interesting study when you look at Wheat Ridge. Our property at Golden, the rents there average $1,875, $78 a month. They're big units, and our residents only leave that property when they buy a house. It's a really strong demographic group. It's an older group. The average age there, I think, forgive me if I got it exactly not right, but it's about 38, and the average income is shy of 6 figures. So it's a strong group. And I think in this property we'll have some of that pull from the Golden and even Boulder areas, Federal Center as well as Denver West. So I think that's where a lot of our residents will go, as well as from the offices and the SCL property adjacent to us.
Once the rent is paid, is there any extra charge for the clubhouse or HOA fees or anything beyond the rent? Just the rent?
I think the utilities are separate, but everything else is part of the deal.
And at the clubhouse or the other amenity areas, are you having any playgrounds, jungle gyms, anything specifically for the children?
We don't on this property, and our unit mix here is primarily 1 and 2 bedroom units, and my experience is that if in these units, in these buildings, we don't see a lot of children. We just don't. They're welcome. We'd love to have them. But the customer mix that we really end up with traditionally is 20 to 35, 20 to 40 years old. Today we're getting a lot of seniors, so there's a second dumbbell, empty nesters that are coming in, and the elevators really help on that. So the entire demographic age of these properties is skewing to the higher side.
What about visitors? Do they pay anything, or are they allowed in the clubhouse?
They're allowed with the guests, and no, it doesn't cost anything.
Okay, so if these elderly that are moving in more frequently have their grandchildren over, then there's no,
Take them to the clubhouse and hang out at the pool. That's more of the community. That's what we're trying to encourage. So the more of that we can get, the better.
not even a smallish jungle gym or something that the children can actually partake in?
This property.
No? Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that, sorry, but there are still all the amenities at the pool area. I didn't mention that we've got an outdoor theater for shows in the evening. It's small, but it allows for, groups of 20 or 25 to watch a show. So they could be at that. They could use the bocce area. They could use the pool. So there are things for kids to do.
All right. I didn't see any differentiation on handicap, specifically parking, of your 495 vehicles. There's obviously handicap set up there?
We provide handicap parking throughout the property as we're required to. And let me take that a step further and mention that because these are elevator-served buildings, every unit in the property is accessible, meaning it's built with the, I hope I've got the right word there, but it's wide enough. It has all the clearances, the turnaround radiuses. No, it doesn't have grab bars, but those can be put in any unit. So it really, eliminates any segregation between those who do and don't have handicaps.
So the 31 bike spaces, what does that consist of? What's a bike space?
Bike space is an outdoor parking space. We find that most of our residents have bikes that are worth more than their cars, and they want to keep them in their units, and they do.
So it's part of the garage area?
No, there'd be outside of the garages in the open area,
So is it?
Landscaped areas. Thank you.
Is it open or undercover?
I believe here they're open.
Open?
Yes.
So you're talking about security?
Or just confirm they're open.
So how's the security of that bike?
They're just parking spaces that you can lock your bike to.
Lock your bike
And
to?
that's why folks tend to keep their expensive bikes in their units.
Commissioner Boss, that is specifically a inverted U bike rack, just our typical bike rack that you would see throughout the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, and what's the access from these units to the Clear Creek Trail?
The access is along Clear Creek Road on the west side of the property. So you would go through the property, go to Clear Creek, and go to the trailhead that was mentioned earlier in conversations.
The trailhead to the east?
The trailhead is on the northwest corner of the property.
Northwest, okay.
And it connects to the north to the trail.
All right, and so they go out of the units onto the road up to the trail.
We have the internal sidewalk connections, and we do have.
Oh, and it does go there?
And we do have some because of the future expansion of Clear Creek, if it ever comes to fruition, the road at the north end of Clear Creek really starts to slope up. So our property is a bit lower, and we've had to create stairs and connections there as well. So it's not a single access, but there are sidewalks all the way throughout.
All right, and I think my last question is, can you speak to the environment of the Clear Creek pond, or the Clear Creek that's there, and while you're doing construction with the environment and the animals and the air, and also I get an understanding that when you're moving dirt around that you're supposed to have a water tanker out there. So you provide for all of that kind of environmental safety issues?
We do, and there's the multifamily, this particular project, other than the wall that's being built by the Metro District, isn't getting out into the creek or the settling pond. And yes, Mortensen, our contractor, has been watering dirt as it's been installed in the entire property. And finally, we have a huge storm water mitigation program. It's state mandated and state run, whereby we're using hay bales and various diversion devices to keep dirt runoff from getting into the storm systems until the landscaping can come in and mature.
And also into Clear Creek.
And also into Clear Creek, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kern?
This looks like a really nice place to live. You've really thought it out. My main concern is siting this many people in this amount of density so close to the highway and dealing with air quality, noise, and vibration. So I know you're going to plant trees on the property. The buildings will shield some of the noise, I suppose, but have you looked at the noise from the highway?
We do, and actually there is a federal housing standard that makes you look at the number of decibels that your property is inside. If you exceed, I think it's 63 decibels, you end up putting enhanced windows, and you actually make smaller windows and insulated walls. We're not there. We're not in the noise zone. And if you think about the property and look at the overall site plan, we are as far west from the highway as you could possibly be in the site.
Yep.
And we're really kind of tucked back in that far corner. And I think as the property, as the overall property builds out, this is going to be a really cool spot with the access to the creek and the views to the west and to the north. You can see the Flatirons from here. So it's going to be a good one. I'm excited about it.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The property directly east between this development and the highway, what is that?
So that land was purchased by SCL. And Stephanie, do you want to address exactly what they're doing there?
Sure. So we don't have a specific development plan in yet, which is part of what makes planning for a future site that's adjacent difficult, because all of these go hand in hand, right? With the outline development plan and design pattern book, they all need to tie into one another. But the hospital site is what is planned for. They are the owners of the property. They purchased it from Evergreen Master Developer. A lot of these other little sites are still being sold off and haven't been purchased, but SCL has been purchased.
So that property is several years at least away from development.
We're likely looking at least a year or two before we see any specific plans for that site.
And then it could take a year or two after that before ground is broken.
Yes.
So in the meantime, we'll have a fully developed property surrounded, it looks like, on that side by a similar retaining wall as to on the north? Because you've got about maybe a 15-foot grade?
No retaining wall at this point to the east. There's only a grade there. There's an easement that allows grading along that edge. And when that use gets fully figured out, then that user will blend into the grades into our existing site.
Is there any concern that in the interim that you could have a runoff issue?
A what issue?
Runoff, based
runoff.
Stormwater runoff
Yeah,
on that side. If there's no retaining wall, there's no.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Is we've had to slope the entire site to the south and to the west to get the sanitary sewers to work. That's part of why that site has been raised as much as it has. So if there's any runoff, it's going south and west, and there shouldn't be any significant runoff to the east or north either.
So in general, the stormwater will run from east to west and north to south?
Yes.
And is there any concern then about undeveloped property to your east and?
So just to chime in here, I believe that's been stabilized. I've been out to the site. I haven't been out there recently, but a lot of these pad sites have been seeded and they're stabilized, so you won't have to worry about any runoff and, dirt getting into Clear Creek or anything like that. And I believe that site's been stabilized. I'm not sure.
I believe you're right, Jordan. Thank you very much.
One of the requirements for any construction site over 1 acre in size is that they obtain a discharge permit from the state and have a stormwater management plan. So we actually have one person who's fully dedicated stormwater manager in the Public Works Department, and he routinely makes visits, probably to Clear Creek Crossing and other construction sites in the city, looking for exactly that. It's an active and changing environment, and they are heavily regulated by local, state, and federal laws for stormwater during construction.
And believe me, I appreciate that. The only concern that I raise it is that you're going to have a property directly adjacent that is uphill that won't be developed for 5 years or longer.
Sure.
And this doesn't.
We have to plan around that, right? So even the corners, which is a significantly smaller project, phased development takes years, and we know that. Belmar, Westminster Town Center, Stapleton. So it will take time. We have, overlot grading plans and master grading plans, and then planning area grading plans, and trying to understand what it looks like in the built condition, the interim conditions, the future conditions. So we share that concern, but I feel comfortable saying that I think we're controlling that to the extent that we can. Mm-hmm.
Any other commission, or, Guy, you
Yeah.
have one? I have a long list. Let's go.
I don't have a long list. I just have a short list. The access to Clear Creek Trail. Before the construction started out there was you come under the I-70 bridge, and you could take a left and go up along the edge of that property. There's a big fence there that says trail is closed. So that cuts off one access point. Part of my question is that going to be reestablished? My second question is, I just looked for it very quickly, and I couldn't find it right offhand, but one of the renderings you have in here, since Clear Creek Drive won't be developed until somebody comes up with some way to cross the creek. It's currently a cul-de-sac, and in one of the renderings, it's a cul-de-sac with a turnaround, but it doesn't extend all the way to the trail. So how do you get access to the trail from a cul-de-sac crossing a bunch of detention ponds?
So I can answer question 2. I can't answer question 1, so I'm going to ask for.
I was seeing people going like this. So.
But on question 2, the cul-de-sac, there is actually a trail connection. You can walk along that kind of the toe of the Denver Water Board easement all the way to the trail now without going through any detention ponds. The detention ponds are to the east, and there is good connectivity. I've done it. I've walked down there myself. So
it's kind of rugged country too.
Well, I'm pretty sure there's a sidewalk that comes from the end of the cul-de-sac down to the trail. So that actually becomes a trailhead, and there's parking there that allows others in the community or in the greater community to access the trail from that cul-de-sac.
Okay. So, and the city's going to reestablish the one that comes, I guess it went along Youngsfield or went along.
Yes, so right now it's within the Youngsfield CDOT right-of-way along the frontage there, and that will be reestablished. And there are stipulations for as development occurs that reserves area along the east side of the Clear Creek Crossing development to make sure that that trail access never goes away.
It remains.
Correct.
Okay. And is your landscape architect firm here?
Yes.
Are you it?
I'm not it.
Oh.
Do you need me to bring them up?
Well, I have a question. Although Scott likes to read these diagrams, I hate them. So I'll simplify my question. So there's a retaining wall, and it's a stepped retaining wall. And you're going to have plantings all along in that retaining wall. So as you come off the retaining wall back into the wild world, do you landscape that as well?
Yes. That's not part of the multifamily SDP that you're reviewing today, but yeah, that is part of the plan for the wall.
Okay. So that leads me to the heart of my question, which is one of the things that's nice about Clear Creek Trail is that it goes through wild country. It's not landscaped. So Can a landscape architect assure me that the thing is going to blend with a wild country? I mean, they're panning gold across the trail from where you're talking about, so I don't think they need rhododendrons growing there.
Well, and before I ask Jared to come up and let me try it one time and see if it satisfies your question.
Okay.
Is on the wall side of the settling pond, the detention area, there's really nobody that's over there right now, and so it will be graded from the wall. The trees will be random, but in terms of people accessing the wild country, I'm not sure that that's that. Does that make sense? Or not?
I think when we say landscaping, we're probably using that as a general term to talk about more formal planting patterns and more naturalized planting patterns. So before a few years ago, we allowed detention basins and forebays to just be concrete empty swimming pools. So we have code regulations now that were essentially created anticipating large, very visible detention basins and facilities that require them to be, the language in the code is to be sort of complementary and working with the surrounding environment. So the design, I think, moves from a more formalized planting pattern in the multifamily development to a more naturalized planting as you work your way down the wall and into the Clear Creek area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it would be really out of context.
Certainly.
And you would see that too, kind of in the far northeast portion of the site where it's more of, it's kind of shown as an amenity area north of the dog park. It's not formal plantings, it's more naturalized at that portion too.
Okay. Good, I don't have to read the diagram.
Any more questions, Commissioner Peterson?
No, that's it.
Okay, I would like to start with you mentioned about the clubhouse. There's only one access point, and I guess typically I see the clubhouse is placed in the middle. This clubhouse is on the corner, and you talked about having the mail kiosk. I guess I have some concerns about it being a pinch point as people are trying to get their boxes of mail. And since that's right at the entrance there, what was the reason behind putting it at that corner versus somewhere more in the middle?
Right. So we find that it's important that the clubhouse be visible, that people don't have to hunt for it. It's not only is it a clubhouse amenity, but it's also a leasing center. So it's up front and very visible to everybody that's there. I will say that because the furthest building is 500-600 feet away from the clubhouse, that we tend, my experience is you tend not to have people pull up, stop, grab their mail, and go to their apartment. They tend to go home and then meander over, have a cup of coffee, talk to the property manager, play on their Wi-Fi in the clubhouse, maybe hang out at the pool, and that becomes part of a daily event, as opposed to a place to stop, like you might, driving into your neighborhood where the pedestal mailbox is. It functions a little bit differently than that.
So is there, traditionally I see like you said, I see a little pull-off spot to kind of stop, get your mail, and go. Is there, I couldn't see the detail at the scale. Is there, so you're saying there is not like a little pull-through area where you'd pull the car temporarily, grab your mail, and go? That doesn't exist?
There's not, but there's parking
Okay.
on either side of the road,
Okay.
and that's would be used for that purpose.
Okay. And then another comment, and I don't know if this is best addressed by you or not, but so on the west side, there's a total vertical difference in walls of 17 feet. There's and it's like 10-foot vertical wall, and there's a 7-foot vertical wall. And from what I can tell, there's no guardrail or fence or anything, I guess, on the downhill side of that retaining wall. Is Longs Peak okay with having workers go up there to maintain the vegetation at a 10 feet vertical drop? There's some shrubs up there that are probably going to be 5 foot wide, so they're going to be somewhat impassable. So that's one of my concerns. And the next question I kind of have with that too is, could there, I understand where the property line is, and then there's generally most of the retaining walls are north of that property line. except for a small portion of the very far west. But could the walls in some of those areas be further tiered to reduce the vertical height?
So if they were tiered more, that would push out to, first of all, they're still going to be whatever height they are, right? Whether it's
still going to be 17
2 or
feet.
3
Yeah.
functions. I
Yeah.
think when you go back and look at those elevations that we did from the Clear Creek, I was really surprised how unobtrusive those walls are. I would encourage you to take a look at that. If you add another tier, it adds another, 10
Right.
feet, Mike, to the 10-ish feet, that it would push into the detention area. And we're trying to not use the property for walls, but to use it for, use.
Okay. So that was just kind of a safety concern of mine. And then this might be a question for Kephart. The 4-story buildings, they're generally, the long side is generally facing east-west. So I would imagine that there's a significant amount of shade. What is the horizontal distance of that shade produced by the building on the north side? And the context that I want to ask that question is, and this will be a question for Norris Design, the question I have is, how much shade is there, and is that native grass, those plants, going to survive in that deep shade?
So if you look at the site plan, you'll see that most of the buildings except the 2 immediately adjacent to the clubhouse run east-west. So the north exposure you have is at the wall on the 3 northern buildings. You've got a little bit right here. And then the space between the 2 buildings, I didn't talk about that before, but one of the things we try to do with these is, Adam, is this 50? Is that what we got, 50 feet between these buildings? Is that about right? 60 feet. So we've created a really large space between these 2 buildings. When you go back and look at the building elevations, you can see that one side of the building has tuck under parking on it. The other side doesn't. So when we build these site plans, and earlier versions of this had more of that situation, what we try to do is create meaningful, I call it meaningful open space. So a 60-foot wide, little half a football field in here starts to be a real park, real effective area. And I can call Adam up, and I don't know if you can even guess at the shadow, but I will say that where we've done this in the past, of course in the summer, almost the entire zone is lit, and we do 5-story construction that has courtyards in the center with pools, and we're able to get sunlight in those in the summer. Obviously, not as much in the winter. Do you want us to see if I can give you a swag at a number, or?
I think I know particularly like that building 6 there's gonna be a lot of shade cast by that. I don't know what that distance would be, but the question is more, I don't necessarily need that number. I just want assurances that the plant material picked for that north side
Right here.
will, the top one, right there. Yeah, those, because there's a lot of native grasses, and a lot of those native grasses need more sun.
Norris, I've got a thumbs up from Norris, our landscape architect, who says that I think he's probably telling me that we picked the right species to work with that light. Yes.
Okay, and I have several questions for Norris Design if they could come forward.
Come on, Jared.
While they're coming up, if I could just add, the city does have a landscape inspection program. So all properties, commercial, multifamily, that have approved landscape plans, we have a staff person with us now and a 0.75 FTE budget request in for a more permanent position where we go out and do an inspection. So if there's an area, and we've seen it frequently, where like we didn't get the irrigation or the plant species quite right, we'll work with the property owner over the time. We want to create this culture of caring about landscaping. It has a huge visual impact on our community. So that's the kind of thing, not that we don't want to get it our best shot the first time, but we don't always get it right the first time, and we have a person now who's specialty is to modify where needed through that program.
Okay. If you could give your name and address for the record, please.
Yes. My name is Jared Carlin with Norris Design, 1101 Bannock Street in Denver. Thank you all for your time this evening. Commissioner, happy to answer any questions you have.
So the first question you said, I wanted to have you come up here and answer that question about the vegetation on the north side of the building and the 4-story, particularly like the native grasses. There's not it looked like, and the other question is it appears that there's probably, I don't know, it's hard to tell by scale, maybe a 5-foot plus strip of cobble that surrounds the perimeter of the buildings. If you could tell us why.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the buildings are 4 stories, so we carefully looked at the entire planting plan to make sure that we use the right species both on either side of the building depending on solar orientation. And so if you look at the tree species and the shrub species, I think you'll see that we the 5-foot and also the solar orientation for the buildings on the north side, they open up a little bit to the west as well. So as we were looking at it, they are going to get some sun in the evenings, even in the colder months and shorter days during the winter. The 5-foot cobble zone is we kind of keep that area for kind of our non-irrigated area zone around the foundations from a geotechnical standpoint to protect the foundations of the building from moving due to irrigation breaks in the irrigation lines. So we try to do that as best practice. And then we are showing some native grass on the northern side of the project there outside of that zone. Partially, the main reason we're doing that is to kind of keep that natural appearance and to kind of blend in with the natural, the way that it looks along Clear Creek to the north within that environment.
Okay. And I noticed that the city of Wheat Ridge recommends a xeric landscape. Looking at the tree list, the birch tree is a high water user and it appears which utilizes a lot of moisture around its area, but it's planted right next to the building foundations. That's just a comment. But my question is, it's also on landscape note number 8, it says trees shall not be located, and this is on your plans, in drainage swales, drainage areas, utility easements, or within 10 feet of a storm sewer line. However, it appears that there's several trees that are in the easements, such as the buildings 8 and 9 with the birch trees. Those are directly in an easement. And there are some trees that are directly over top of storm pipes. If the trees are removed or relocated from the easements and pipes, will there be a sufficient quantity of trees to meet the code?
So yeah, we'll make sure that we keep the quantities so that they meet the code.
Okay.
And if we need to move them around, I would say we work closely with the city and the engineering staff to carefully place the trees. Some of them, you're exactly right, and it's good that you picked up on that they are within easements. We're trying to keep between 5 and 10 feet away from the utility, and some of those cases where they are over the storm lines are really deep or deeper there, and so we've had those conversations and are looking at them. But as we further work with the city through the technical kind of correction part of the process, if we need to move those, we'll make sure we move them and not remove them.
Okay. And then a small technical, it says there's one of the ornamental trees is a 6-foot clump, and the city standard's a 2-inch caliper. That's just a technical comment. And then why is it possible or not possible to plant any, looking at the renderings and the plans for the landscape, there's really no large deciduous canopy trees on the north side there. And those would probably be well outside the property because it'd be on the north side of the retaining walls. Is it possible to have any large deciduous canopy to help break up the building elevations on that north side?
Yeah, we can work with the city and on the north side of the wall, like on the low side of the wall, or on top of the wall?
Not on top of the wall,
Right.
on the bottom, the bottom of the wall, yeah.
So as we work through those plans for the detention area, we'll definitely keep that in mind of trying to get some big trees there.
And maybe a native appropriate, off the top of my head, maybe something that, like a male cottonwood that doesn't produce pollen and cotton. Okay. Let's see. And do you know, is there any, I didn't notice any, there wasn't a lot, any details, but is there going to be any kind of wayfinding graphic signage for this particular project? Or is that, and if so, is that going to be part of a larger sign package or something down the future?
Right, we actually work pretty hard at signing all the buildings, all the clubhouse. I mean, we signed the doggy daycare, the paw spa where the dog wash is. So yeah, we do that throughout the property.
Okay.
And it's part of a larger signage package.
Okay. Let's see. I think that's all the questions I have. Do any other commissioners have any other questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, we will now move on to the Citizens Forum. There will be a 3-minute time limit, and time may not be yielded to another person. Are there any citizens that have signed up to speak?
No, nobody signed up.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I will close the Citizens Forum. At this time, I would entertain a motion, unless there's any other questions for the staff. And please refer to the handout that we just received.
I move to recommend approval of case number WZ 1901, request for approval of a specific development plan approval for the construction of a 310-unit multifamily apartment project on property located within Planning Area 2 of Clear Creek Crossing for the following reasons. 1, the specific development plan is consistent with the purpose of a planned development as stated in Section 26-301 of the Code of Laws. 2, the specific development plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of the outlined development plan. 3, the proposed uses are consistent with those approved by the outlined development plan. 4, all responding agencies have indicated they can serve the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. And 5, the specific development plan is in substantial compliance with the applicable standards set forth in the outlined development plan and with the city's adopted design manuals, with the following conditions. Number 1, the technical corrections requested by Planning and Public Works related to labels, notes, and typos shall be addressed prior to SDP recording and prior to issuance of any building permit. 2, an agreement for the off-site secondary access shall be recorded by separate document prior to recordation of the SDP. The agreement shall include the PA1 and PA2 property owners, shall address the phasing, timing, and obligation of the access, and shall be subject to approval by the West Metro Fire Protection District, City of Wheat Ridge Public Works Director, and City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Director. 3, if, upon build-out of the subject site, the interim secondary access is found to be inadequate and/or to pose significant safety concerns, the city may require completion of the permanent loop road or another alternative secondary access to be approved by Public Works at the discretion of the Public Works Director. And 4, agreement between the property owner and Longs Peak Metro District shall be recorded by separate document prior to issuance of any building permit. The agreement shall set forth construction, ownership, and maintenance provisions for the retaining walls.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I know this was a lot of work. I'd like to thank the developer and the consultants of the developer and the staff. My opinion is definitely that looks like a really nice project, and that if I had to vote for either tiering the retaining walls or having a large deciduous canopy tree, I would vote for the large deciduous canopy tree. And I think that would help kind of break it up. So that's my opinion on that. If there's not any other discussion, then let's vote.
Motion passed 6-0.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving on to old business. Is there any old business?
There's no old business.
Is there any new business?
The only new business is dates. We won't have our second September meeting, and we will see you on October 3rd for a study session and training.
Lauren, will there be any pre-reading before our session in October?
I have not gotten that far. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm just a little, I'd like to at least have an idea of what it is we're going to discuss,
Sure.
sort of the boundaries of our discussion.
The one topic we have for study session
Well,
is-
and that's exactly my concern. We don't have a couple of days to discuss all the issues I'm sure we'd like to discuss. So I would suggest that sometime between now and a week before, that staff come up with a few suggested topics so we can get out before, say, 2 in the morning.
Sure, we will not, I promise you, we won't go till 2 in the morning. The first topic we'll talk about is something we need some direction in, related to the inclusive public hearings, or that online public hearing platform I alluded to the other day. So we're doing a study session with you on that tool and with City Council the following week. And then we'll do the training session. So last time we had an outline that we followed, so that kept it fairly structured. So I have some ideas on topics that I've noted down over the last few months since then. If any of you have suggestions or some specific topic that you would like to dive into, email me, please, as we sort of ruminate on what that outline would look like over the coming weeks. Sure, yeah.
3 minutes.
No, thank you, and
Yeah.
that was sort of the big question mark I had
Sure.
Going into this, without having, only knowing that we had all agreed as a commission that we wanted to have a session.
Yep. Yeah, if there's something you specifically want to make sure we're addressing, then let me know, please. It's meant to be a resource. Okay, I will put some thought into it next week. I have no other new business.
Are there any other comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make motion.
Second? Any discussion? Vote.
Motion passed 6-0.